One of the ideas behind loyalty was building a personal relationship. Personal relationships are inherently reciprocal. You give, I give, right? In today's world, brands expect you to be loyal, but are they reciprocating in any way? Are they showing any loyalty to you? If you stop flying for a couple of months because you're sick or you had to take some time off and then you try to come back, you're bucked down to another level and they don't care.
I'd like to welcome you to a three-part series we're calling Breaking Loyalty, and you'll find out why we chose that name in a little bit. But for the most part, what we think we want you to understand right up front is that this is not a series of rah-rahs. We're not going to spend 3 parts talking about success stories. Rather, our intent here is to do something that we feel the loyalty industry really needs, and that is be instructive. Let's talk about things that are actionable because they need to be talked about. To help me with that conversation is someone who has architected, designed, fixed more loyalty programs than you can shake a stick at, has his name on some of the biggest ones in the industry. I'd like to welcome Mike Ribeiro to the conversation.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me on. This is obviously a subject matter I'm very passionate about, and I look forward to the conversation.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background? I skimmed high level, but I think what you've done specifically is going to resonate with so many of our listeners.
Sure. I'm actually one of the original architects of modern day loyalty. I guess you could say that. That might date me a little bit, but after starting my career at Procter & Gamble in brand management, I found myself in the airline industry and led one of the teams that created the Continental One Pass program. It was the combination of the Eastern Airlines and Continental Airlines loyalty programs, and it was a very innovative program at the time. It was the first to offer 2 tiers of rewards, a saver level that kind of paralleled the fare market, the regular fare market. It introduced you could buy miles so you could travel when you wanted, and it was the first to have a branded credit card where you could earn for spending in other areas. From there, at an age where I was too young for the job, I became the chief marketing officer at Hilton Hotels Corporation, Hilton Worldwide now, and created the Hilton Honors program literally from the ground up. And that posed some really unique challenges in that, unlike the airlines, hotel companies typically don't own all their hotels, and so you had to create a completely different economic system to make it work. And we were able to do that. Since then, I've worked on probably 20 different programs from the insurance industry to financial services, entertainment, including Warner Brothers and Sega, and companies like eBay and E-Trade, helping them drive customer behavior and create loyalty. And I more recently started really kind of thinking about loyalty again and realizing that I believe the loyalty system is broken, and tried to develop some solutions to the issues that are facing the industry with the creation of a company called Reach, where we developed some unique approaches to address some of the problems that I think the industry has to address, and quickly, to maintain its viability.
So full transparency, Mike and I have known each other for 3 or 4 years. I've had a pretty close view as to what Reach is all about, and it's pretty exciting technology, but that's not what this is about. This is about fixing loyalty, because we both believe, and I think anybody who will give you a kind of sidebar conversation in the loyalty business will admit that it's broken. The thing is, I think a lot of professionals, and by the way, this industry is populated with some very, very smart people, understand this broken, but may not have a full understanding to what extent. So we want to structure this in a sensible way. We're going to spend episode number 1 talking about what went wrong and why. Episode number 2 is going to focus on what customers want and what brands need. And episode 3, we're going to get around to the fixes. What does fixing loyalty take? So for this first episode, what went wrong? I think it might be helpful to talk about the current situation, Mike, and how we got here.
Well, it all started, Mike, when I started looking into member satisfaction as it relates to their loyalty program, and realized that for several years now, member satisfaction has gone well below 50% across every conceivable industry. There aren't too many businesses that can succeed when satisfaction is under 50%. And then that was further underscored, and the negativity around it really came into focus when you look at social media sentiment, where 89% of social media sentiment around loyalty programs today is negative, making only 11% positive. Digging down deeper into the causes of it and what the challenges are, the increased level of complexity and restrictions trying to manage growth has resulted in skyrocketing cost of loyalty program operations. So today it's almost $80 billion a year that U.S. companies spend on operating their loyalty programs, and it represents 25% of the typical marketing budget for the companies that have them. And almost 92% of companies have some kind of loyalty program. But the real concern, I think, Mike, is the fact that if you look at in the U.S. alone, the liability that has been created by unredeemed points and miles, you're looking at an economy that's probably at the size of the 55th to 60th largest economy in the world. It's 125 to 150 billion dollars. That's the estimate of unredeemed points and miles in the U.S. today. And that's a concern because redemption rates are continuing to decline. And with U.S. consumers accumulating roughly $50 billion worth of loyalty currency every year, that number is going to become unmanageable here fairly quickly, especially for those companies that are publicly traded, where the reserves against those unredeemed points and miles shows up as a big chunk of their short and long-term liabilities.
Can you just repeat the number you said a moment ago? How much accumulated unredeemed points and miles are there in the U.S. right now? Ballpark?
It's between 125 and 150 billion, and some estimates have it higher. And if you think about it, Mike, with roughly 16 to 18 billion of the 50 billion that people are accumulating annually continuously being accrued, that number is just going to continue to get bigger. And with redemption rates continuing to decline, that number is going to grow each year. And so you're going to get to a point where it's just not feasible to maintain that level of reserve.
Just to put a finer point on it, we've had this conversation before, but the loyalty programs for a couple of the major airlines, the value of the loyalty programs exceeds the value of the actual operating airline.
Yeah,
so you can imagine what would happen if, for instance, an accounting rule came down from whoever they come down from that said that all of that liability that is right now held in reserves on your balance sheet has to be dealt with within some period of time. You'd see a big chunk of this economy go dark.
Yeah, and again, it's getting harder because if you look at the airlines as an example, their load factors are significantly higher because there's fewer flights, so flights are fuller. There's less inventory to play with when it comes to redemption purposes. And so they either have to displace a paying customer, which they hate doing, or frustrate them. And unfortunately, there's much more frustration taking place now, and loyalty is being affected. There was a recent study done by McKinsey that showed that that net promoter index for programs where are down significantly for airlines, hotels, and cruise, where the people willing to recommend the program has dropped precipitously from 2021 to 2023. And I think people are starting to feel the impact of not only the fact that their currency is being constantly devalued and they can't use it when they want to, but the frustration associated with trying to obtain value from it has gotten to the point where people are just forgetting about it.
I have a sneaking suspicion that if you talk to a loyalty professional right now, and I'm the first to admit, I think that people in loyalty are some of the smartest people in business, because if you're good at it, you have to think about almost every aspect of business to have a successful loyalty program operating. But I think a lot of professionals would acknowledge that loyalty is broken on some level, but I don't think that many people see just how broken it is, which begs the question, How did we get here?
Well, there's no easy answer to that, but the kind of the overriding reality is that in the almost 40 years since the programs were first introduced and became part of the kind of the fabric of ongoing brand marketing, they really haven't evolved. Despite the fact that you've had a massive level of social, economic, and behavioral changes that have taken place since the mid 80s. And that's, I think, one of the roots of the problem. We have changed just by virtue of the number of demographic or generational segments that a company has to address in today's world. The amount of technology that's been deployed and its impact on human contact and things like that. Yet loyalty programs, who are in a perfect position to lead and facilitate these transitions, have been kind of oddly silent in their role that they've played.
How so? Can you describe that a little bit? Because I think that's really interesting. Again, referring to a lot of people I know who work in this industry, we're all very forward. They are. I'm a sidelines guy. I just comment on people doing the actual work, but all very forward-looking people. These are people who have a really good handle on the technological capabilities, are trying to figure out the smartest ways to audit existing programs and make them more efficient. But when you say that loyalty programs and the people behind them are in a perfect position to lead that discussion, what do you mean by that?
Let me give you two examples, Mike. Number one is originally loyalty programs were developed with the idea of providing reward and recognition, hitting the rational and the emotional side of a person, and learning about them so you could forge a more personal relationship. The data component of loyalty was critical. That would be a very easy way of addressing the level of multi-generational segments you have today, and being able to understand the needs of millennials and Gen Zs as much as programs do today for boomers, who were the core audience when they were first launched. Similarly, if they had focused on the data component, loyalty programs represent the ideal solution for the data privacy issue today, because of the trust they are supposed to be able to build and the fact that they have a currency that they can use to help their best customers or members monetize their personal information in a way that still gives the customer the wherewithal to decide and how they want to, who they want to share that information with and how they share it. And so those are two areas where loyalty could have been at the forefront of solving a real problem and challenge for the marketing industry today, where they have been all too silent and haven't really stepped up to the opportunity that's been presented to them.
It sounds to me like what you're saying is let's just paint a really broad stroke here. Major loyalty programs just haven't evolved according to what consumers' needs are right now. I'm paraphrasing, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. And what the data might allow us to do.
Absolutely. I mean, they haven't evolved, period, number one. But the evolution that has taken, the changes that have taken place have been more to manage growth and have resulted in things like increased complexity, more restrictions, and the devaluation of the currency, which I think are all could have been avoided had the programs been more fluid and been more responsive to the changes in consumer and societal behavior. And I think a big part of that, Mike, was the fact that the loyalty programs were designed for the travel industry specifically initially. And one of the reasons they made so much sense for the travel industry because of travel as a currency itself. Travel is aspirational, it's appealing, it's romantic, it has emotional elements that make its value far greater, its perceived value far greater than its actual value. And so that's what made the currency attractive. When you try to apply that down to retail or restaurant or other services and products, it just doesn't translate the same way. And yet those companies just tried to replicate what the travel industry did. And that's why so many of them have to go back to the travel industry for the currency. So, and that's what's created that secondary market of selling currency, selling miles and points to third parties, which is a part of the problem, by the way.
A groundswell starts small, quietly building into something powerful, unstoppable. That's also how market momentum works. If you're launching a startup, introducing a new product, rebranding, or rolling out a new service or initiative, it's not enough to simply show up. You need to build momentum strategically. Specializing in go-to-market strategy, Groundswell works with organizations at every stage, creating custom plans that help products and brands break through the noise and grow, ensuring a launch that doesn't just happen, it sticks. From understanding your target audience to perfecting your positioning, Groundswell's approach ensures you're not just catching the market's attention, but keeping it. With expert guidance, your product moves from launch day to long-term success, turning that initial wave of excitement into sustained growth. If you're ready to take your product, service, or brand to market, it might be time to think about a Groundswell strategy. Visit groundswell.cc to learn more. Is this a function of just taking your eye off the ball? What the ultimate goal would be to increase basket size, frequency, and all that, and improve customer engagement? Or was it a combined function of KPIs and metrics that only were designed for the short term, designed to get the executive their bonus?
I think it's the latter, Mike. I think it was a focus. Originally, loyalty programs were created to forge a relationship with your best customers in a way where you created an opportunity cost, right? By virtue of answering two basic questions. What do I get for doing business with the brand? And how do I feel about doing business with the brand? Or how does the brand make me feel? And in the quest for profit, they forgot about the how do I feel part and focused exclusively on the rewards as a way of driving short-term revenues. And they became so myopically focused that they forgot about the fact that they had to offer continuous improvement to keep the customer engaged. That was one of the basic principles. There were four basic principles, Mike, that we, when we were building or designing the original loyalty infrastructure, it was create an opportunity cost for non-exclusive use of a brand, address both their rational and emotional needs because you need them both to forge an effective relationship, accumulate data so you get a better sense of who each customer is, and use all of that to build trust. Those were and again, with that, in order to keep them engaged, you had to make a commitment and demonstrate a commitment to continuous improvement.
Which one of those four do you think we fell apart on the worst?
I think you can make an argument that that there is no more clear opportunity cost. The focus has been on rewards and not recognition or rational factors, pricing, discounts. And that's why I think many loyalty programs have become reward programs, and the worst of them have become discount programs in disguise. And then I think that undermines trust. And because of the failure of the industry to evolve, had been no continuous improvement. So that doesn't give consumers any level of permission to believe that things are going to get better. So as the more frustrated they get, the more they give up and say the points aren't worth anything, or they're being devalued to such a certain level that it really doesn't matter.
And to paraphrase what a consumer might be thinking, they don't care. Thus,
exactly. And again, one of the ideas behind loyalty was building a personal relationship. Personal relationships are inherently reciprocal. You give, I give, right? In today's world, brands expect you to be loyal, but are they reciprocating in any way? Are they showing any loyalty to you? If you stop flying for a couple of months because you're sick or you had to take some time off and then you try to come back, you're bucked down to another level and they don't care. And again, Mike, the other kind of real concern here is over the last 20 plus years, with the advent of technology that's been implemented what we don't realize is the more technology you implement, the less human contact you have. The less human contact you have, the harder it is to form an emotional bond with a brand. And as a result, we've lost that critical component. So when you are asking the question, what do I get from the brand? Yeah, I get my points and everything, but how do I feel, or how does the brand make me feel? That part has, for a lot of brands, many brands, I'd say most brands, has been completely forgotten.
Just evaporated. Well, and it becomes even more complex when you think about the differences in the way some of the younger generations kind of demand to be interacted with. Gen Z and millennials, they grew up with an entirely different paradigm for what interaction and engagement really means. So they might be a little bit more comfortable with something that's purely digital. But what you find out, you look at the data, is that the interpersonal relationships that they have with brands that are solid are very, very, very deep.
And they're all driven by personalization.
Yep.
That which is important to them, and which is where loyalty, I think, is failing fairly significantly. And again, it really is about it really is about kind of changing the paradigm. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but it really is about changing the mindset. You're not a customer, you're a partner of mine, and there's value you can add to my business that extends beyond you making a purchase on occasion. And if I can harness that potential, your value to me can grow exponentially. And I think that's kind of the first realization that we need to make. And then we need to go back and say, hey, look, we need to, things have become far too complicated. Programs have done a very poor job managing their growth. And instead of trying to innovate, they've added more complexity. They've added more restrictions. They've devalued the currency. They have not done a good job of managing growth. And look, things happen. COVID happened, and other things happen. And those are catastrophic kinds of situations you have to recover from. But there's been almost a systematic devaluation of currency as a way of managing growth, as opposed to looking for other ways, expanding the scope of currency utility and other things that could have easily solved that problem. And I look at it, for example, American Express, what they've done with Amazon, where you can pay with points on Amazon. The value of expanding the utility of an American Express point was so great that people are willing to sacrifice 30 cents on the dollar to be able to do that. So
isn't that crazy?
100 cents on the dollar, they're getting 70 cents on the dollar. And that's still their largest redemption area because it adds true value to the customer.
So I'm thinking back to the original 4 premises and goals that you outlined a moment ago. Creating opportunity costs for not joining, making sure the program has rational and emotional needs that are addressed, and values, to accumulate valuable data, and then to build trust. And it seems to me that you could overlay that kind of grid, if you will, onto any loyalty program that's out there today and grade them on it, and you'd find at least one of those, actually probably more like 3 of those, that are sorely lacking.
Absolutely.
Sorely lacking. So it begs the question, does this require an entire rethinking of what loyalty is and should be, or can fixes be achieved? Stay tuned for episode 3 when we'll tell you the answer to this, by implementing incremental improvements on existing programs.
I think, again, you have to start somewhere, and the loyalty industry is so big and it has so much inertia behind it that trying to make a wholesale change is something that nobody's going to buy. You have to do it incrementally. I think one of the big problems we have, and one of the reasons we've gotten here, is we're several generations removed from the people that develop the programs for most companies. And so you have program managers that may not completely understand the architecture of their existing system and certainly don't want to break anything. And so I think wholesale changes are at this point in time not a real feasible strategy. So you have to look at things incrementally, and everything. And again, it's not rocket science, Mike. Everything starts with the customer, and thinking about how does a customer want to be treated. There's tons of research out there from Bond, from Ebo, from others that tell you exactly what customers want. the challenge and that companies face is being able to provide customers with what they want in innovative ways that also meet the needs of the brand. And there's ways to do that. We figured it out in certain areas, how to deal with the data privacy issue and turning that data privacy challenge into a competitive advantage, how to deal with the incentive side of things, the rewards, in a way that is a win-win. Finding different ways of addressing the complexity issue. Unfortunately, one of the errors, the problems that exist today is a lot of companies tailor their platform to the less than 1% of people that are going to try to cheat them, as opposed to the 99% that are acting that want to engage with the brand and do so in a way that's not frustrating. And so again, it's really about it's really about collaborating with your customers and finding a solution, working in collaboration that works for everybody.
So I want to recap a couple of things, and then we can touch on a couple of final points here. But the four main premises, goals of a loyalty program, I don't think you can overstate the importance. And this applies to every single loyalty program out there. A couple of minor variations to the theme, but listen to this again. Goal number one, creating an opportunity cost for not joining.
Or for non-exclusive use, even if
non-exclusive use.
Yeah, if you buy another brand, you should feel some level of pain for not having bought the brand that you belong to their program. And again, there'll be situations where the brand's not available, that they don't have a flight to that particular market, but there should be a cost that you feel when you are forced to buy away from the brand.
Goal number two, needs to address rational and emotional needs.
Yep. If you're a member of the program, you should feel like you're treated better. You have unique experiences, that you're recognized for the value that you give, that you're treated as an individual, not as part of, and that the company knows enough about you. And that gets into the data part of it, where they can have an ongoing conversation where it feels like you're talking to a friend, not an automated attendant or a chatbot that can't answer your questions and has no empathy.
And I like the way you just put that. Every one of those factors you just mentioned were emotional ones. How it made you feel, because there's lots of ways to provide for rational benefits, but you find out that sum total, it's the emotional ones that really pay the dividends.
And those are the ties that bind, right? Yep. It's easy for for a competitor to buy you out of the rational side of the equation. They can always price it cheaper, provide more, but it's very, very hard to buy the way somebody feels based on a history that you have with that brand.
Thirdly, accumulate data.
Absolutely. And again, loyalty programs are ideally positioned because there's a mechanism to remunerate the customer for sharing information that's actionable and that is guaranteed to be compliant with GDPR, CCPA, any of the new privacy standards. Because if you're sharing data directly, I, as an individual, own that data and can do what I want with it. It's really a function of me trusting a brand enough to share it with them.
Right. And then lastly, use those mechanisms to build trust.
Yep. And there's Steve Jobs said, a brand is simply trust. And again, trust is an emotional driver, right? Trust is the door opener. Trust makes things possible. And without it, you're not going to get make much headway. And then obviously there's the underlying thing of continuous improvement, which is what helps keep people engaged.
Yeah, put another way, that there is no such thing as one size fits all loyalty. There's not even one size fits most loyalty, unlike my sweatpants, which you can fit basically anybody in. Loyalty today demands to be personalized to a level that'll create an emotional response. And that can't happen if you're applying the same old criteria that have been applied to loyalty since day one.
And the best example I use, and people don't even realize this is a loyalty initiative, but vanishing deductible for the insurance industry, where every year you stick with a company, your deductible goes down to the point where it's zero. Now, even though you might be able to save on insurance for another company, there's that perception that I'm going to lose my zero vanishing or my 0% deductible. And that becomes a huge opportunity cost for switching. So there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. And it just takes a little innovation and knowledge of a specific industry to decide what kind of behavior and what kind of psychology you want to implement to forge the strongest relationship possible.
Mike, I can't thank you for the time and the thinking. Very much looking forward to episode number 2. Part 2 of Breaking Loyalty, we're going to address what customers want and what brands need. And we're teeing all this up because the third episode in this series will address fixing loyalty with actionable, practical steps that companies of all sizes in all verticals can take, understand, and apply and improve their loyalty programs. Mike Ribeiro, thanks a million for joining me.
Sounds good. See you part 2.